When my husband died, my daughter inherited the house and $42 million. Then she kicked me out saying, "Find somewhere else to disappear, you're useless now." Days later, the lawyer laughed out loud. "Did you actually read the will?" My daughter's face went pale because the real will said, "She gets nothing." And from that moment, I realized how greedy my daughter truly was. I would make her pay. Hello, everyone. You just heard how my daughter threw me out, but that's only the beginning. Comment what you think I did next. Give up, forgive her, or get revenge, like and subscribe for part 2. Note some details are dramatized, but the message is meaningful. When my daughter told me to find somewhere else to go, that I was useless now, I packed my bags like the obedient mother I'd always been. 6 weeks after Thomas's funeral on a gray Seattle afternoon, Rachel arrived at 3842 Willow Creek Court with Jason and 2 expensive suitcases. I was still sleeping in the guest room, unable to face the master bedroom where Thomas's reading glasses sat untouched on the nightstand. The doorbell rang at 3:15. When I opened the door, Rachel walked past me without a hug, without asking how I was holding up. "Mom, we need to talk." She set her designer purse on the console table. "Jason and I have made a decision." Jason started bringing in suitcases, large ones. Decision. I wrapped my cardigan tighter. "Jason got the promotion. We need to move into town, and this house is perfect for us." Rachel surveyed the living room like someone appraising property. My heart raced. "Move in. But this is my home." Her expression shifted cold, calculating. "Actually, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the investments, all of it. I've been letting you stay out of kindness, but it's time for you to find your own place." The words didn't make sense. "Rachel, your father would never—" "There's no mistake. Dad knew I'd take better care of his legacy than you ever could. You never understood money or investments." She checked her phone dismissively. "You were just the wife." Just the wife. 43 years reduced to those 3 words. Behind her, Jason measured the room with his eyes, planning where their furniture would go. Then she delivered the killing blow. "Find somewhere else to go, Mom. You're useless now." The cruelty stole my breath. This was the daughter whose hand I'd held on her first day of school, whose wedding I'd planned, whose children I babysat every week. The woman I'd defended to Thomas when he worried about her sense of entitlement. He'd been right. I found myself packing without deciding to. 2 suitcases, Thomas's and mine, from our last vacation to the San Juans. 43 years of life reduced to closed toiletries and 1 small box of photos. I left everything else, Christmas ornaments, books, treasures from our travels. Rachel watched from the doorway, checking her watch impatiently. There's a nice senior complex on Maple Street. Very affordable. Affordable. She was inheriting millions and suggesting welfare housing for the elderly. Jason loaded my suitcases with the efficiency of disposing garbage. Rachel pulled out her wallet and pressed a single $100 bill into my hand like tipping a maid. "This should cover you for a few days. I'll have Jason transfer money once we sort Dad's paperwork." Some money. From my own inheritance she'd stolen. But I didn't know that yet. Jason drove me to the Valley View Motor Court in silence. As his BMW pulled away from 3842 Willow Creek Court, I watched my home disappear. The home where I'd hosted birthday parties, nursed Thomas through illness, spent 43 years building a life. 43 years reduced to 2 suitcases and $100. I'd spent decades making that house a home. Homemade birthday cakes, Christmas stockings on the mantel, graduations and ordinary Tuesdays that felt sacred. I'd maintained every detail Thomas cared about, kept his shirts pressed, decorated to his taste. Now I was being discarded like an expired prescription. As Seattle rain fell as Jason's car carried me toward a $49 a night motel, one thought pushed through the numbness. Thomas would never have left me with nothing. He'd been traditional, sometimes patronizing about money, but he wasn't cruel. Something was wrong. But grief makes you believe terrible things about yourself. Makes you think maybe you deserve this. Maybe you are useless. Maybe your daughter is right. So I took the $100 and went quietly. That was my first mistake. The Valley View Motor Court smelled like stale cigarette smoke and broken promises. I sat on a sagging mattress, staring at the $100 bill Rachel had pressed into my hand. Outside, rain-battered Seattle, and a neon vacancy sign flickered through thin curtains, casting red shadows across water-stained walls. $49 a night. I did the math twice, hoping I'd gotten it wrong. Rachel's $100 would buy exactly 2 nights in this place. 2 nights, and then what, 67 years old, essentially homeless with $100 to my name. Through paper-thin walls, a couple argued. Their voices rose and fell like a storm I couldn't escape. Rachel had told me I was useless. She'd looked me in the eye and discarded me without hesitation. But as I sat there, something pushed through the fog of grief, a small, insistent voice that wouldn't be quiet. Something wasn't right. Thomas had been obsessive about organization. Tax returns filed in January. Insurance policies updated annually. Everything color-coded, alphabetized, meticulously maintained. A man like that doesn't leave his wife of 43 years with nothing. I closed my eyes, trying to remember. Years ago, Thomas had sat me down with papers spread across our kitchen table. "Barbara, you need to understand our estate planning. If something happens to me, you need to know what we have." I'd listened, though financial talk always made my eyes glaze over. But I remembered the basics. The house was in both. Our names, investments were split. I was provided for. "You'll never have to worry," he'd promised. That wasn't what Rachel had described. Another memory surfaced sharper. 6 months ago, Thomas had come home looking serious. He'd taken my hand across the dinner table. "Barbara, if anything happens to me, I need you to promise me something." My heart had clenched. "Don't talk like that. Promise me you'll trust Samuel Fletcher, only him, not Rachel, not Jason, not anyone else. Samuel Fletcher. Do you understand?" I'd promised, thinking it was Thomas being his usual over-prepared self. But now, sitting in this motel room, that conversation took on new meaning. Thomas had known something. He'd been trying to warn me. I stood and walked to the grimy window, looking out at the rain-slicked parking lot. Somewhere in downtown Seattle, Samuel Fletcher had an office. Tomorrow morning, I was going to find it. My daughter thought she'd gotten rid of me. Thought I'd take my $100 and disappear quietly into whatever facility she had in mind for useless old women. She was wrong. I lay down on that sagging mattress, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible, but exhaustion eventually pulled me under. My last conscious thought was a promise Thomas had been many things traditional, occasionally stubborn, sometimes infuriatingly patronizing about finances, but he wasn't cruel. The man who'd held my hand through my mother's passing, who'd brought me flowers, every anniversary, wouldn't have left me with nothing. Tomorrow, rain or shine, I was going to find Samuel Fletcher and get some answers. The next morning, I counted out exact change for the bus fare, $2.75 that I could barely afford. Seattle looked different in daylight, the rain-washed streets gleaming under a pale sun trying to break through clouds. Downtown towers rose like sentries, and among them was Columbia Tower, where Samuel Fletcher kept his practice. I'd looked up the address on the motel's ancient computer in the lobby, scribbling it on a scrap of paper with a pen that barely worked. 34th floor. Samuel Fletcher, attorney at law. The lobby was all marble and glass, the kind of place where people in expensive suits walked with purpose. I felt small in my wrinkled cardigan and 2-day-old clothes, but I pushed through the revolving doors anyway. The elevator ride up felt endless, my reflection staring back at me from polished brass walls, a 67-year-old woman who looked every bit as lost as she felt. The law office was exactly what I'd expected: mahogany furniture, leather chairs, framed degrees, on walls the color of cream. Everything whispered money and permanence. A young receptionist looked up from her computer with a practiced smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Samuel Fletcher. My name is Barbara Reynolds. It's about my husband's estate." She typed something, picked up the phone. "Mr. Fletcher, Mrs. Reynolds is here to see you about her husband's estate." I heard a man's voice muffled, then the receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly. "Right away, sir." She stood gesturing down a hallway. "He'll see you immediately, Mrs. Reynolds." The door at the end opened before I reached it. Samuel Fletcher stood there, mid-70s, distinguished silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. But those eyes widened when he saw me. "Barbara." He stepped forward, taking my hands in his. "My dear, I was wondering when you'd come in. Please come in, sit down." His office was warm with windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. He guided me to a leather chair across from his massive desk, and I sank into it gratefully. "I tried calling your house several times," he said, settling into his own chair. "But Rachel said you were traveling, taking some time away to grieve." The words hit me like cold water. Traveling. "She said you'd gone to stay with a friend in California, that you needed space and would be in touch when you were ready to deal with estate matters." He paused, studying my face. "Barbara, you're not in California." My hand started shaking. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm not traveling. I've been staying at the Valley View Motor Court on Aurora Avenue." His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "The motel, Barbara, why on earth?" The words came tumbling out, my voice breaking. "Because Rachel told me she inherited everything. The house, all of it. She said according to Thomas's will, I have no claim. She gave me $100 and told me to find somewhere else to go." Samuel Fletcher stood abruptly, his chair rolling back. He reached for a thick file on his credenza, his movement suddenly urgent. "Did Rachel provide you with a copy of the will after the reading?" "What reading?" He froze, file in hand. "What do you mean, what reading? I don't know anything about a will reading, Mr. Fletcher. Rachel never told me about one." His face flushed with anger. Not at me, I realized, but for me. "Barbara, you were supposed to be at the will reading. It was 6 weeks ago, 3 days after Thomas's funeral. Rachel said you were too distraught that she'd handle everything and make sure you received your inheritance." I felt the room tilt. I was never told. She never said a word about a reading. Dear God. Samuel opened the file with trembling fingers, fingers that had probably signed thousands of legal documents without shaking. "Barbara, I need you to listen to me very carefully." He spread papers across his desk, and I saw Thomas's signature at the bottom of the top page. Official seals, witness signatures. "What Rachel has told you is not just wrong. It's not just a misunderstanding or a miscommunication." He looked up at me, and something in his eyes made my heart race, not fear, but something else, something like vindication. "Your daughter has committed multiple felonies, and we're going to make sure she answers for every single one." Samuel gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat, my legs barely holding me. He opened the file, carefully spreading documents across the mahogany surface. Morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating Thomas's signature at the bottom of each page. "May I read this aloud?" Samuel asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak. He cleared his throat and began his voice steady and professional. "I, Thomas James Reynolds, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Barbara Ann Reynolds, the following." The words washed over me like waves. Beloved wife. Thomas had written that. 6 months before he passed, he'd sat in some office, maybe this very office, and written those words. "Our primary residence at 3842 Willow Creek Court, Seattle, Washington, including all furnishings, personal effects, and property therein." The room spun. The house. My house. Not Rachel's. Mine. "Additionally," Samuel continued, "I leave her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts totaling approximately $29.4 million. The number didn't register at first. It was too large, too impossible. $29.4 million. I gripped the arms of the leather chair. "Mr. Fletcher." He held up a gentle hand. "There's more, Barbara. More." How could there be more? To my daughter, Rachel Sullivan Porter, I leave $12.6 million to be held in trust, with distributions beginning on her 45th birthday. So Rachel did inherit something. $12 million. That was still a fortune. Why had she lied about contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death? The words hung in the air. I stared at Samuel. "I don't understand." "It's a contingency clause," Samuel explained, leaning forward. "Thomas was very specific. If Rachel failed to treat you with respect and dignity after his passing, her entire inheritance, all $12.6 million, would revert to you instead. The office was too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. Thomas updated this will 6 months before he passed. Samuel continued softly. He came to me concerned about Rachel's attitude toward money, about what he called her growing sense of entitlement. He wanted to ensure you were protected. Protected from our own daughter. There's even a video message, Samuel added. Thomas recorded it to be played if Rachel ever contested the will, or if, he paused, choosing words carefully, if you reported being mistreated. Thomas had known. Somehow he'd known exactly what Rachel might do. So let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. Rachel was supposed to inherit $12.6 million, but only if she treated me well. Exactly. And by throwing me out of the house, by telling me I was useless, by giving me $100 and saying I inherited nothing. She triggered the forfeiture clause. Samuel finished. Every penny of her inheritance now belongs to you. I did the math in my head, though it seemed impossible. $29.4 million plus $12.6 million. I'm not inheriting $29 million, I whispered. No, Barbara, you're inheriting $42 million, plus the house, plus all personal property. The irony was so perfect it was almost funny. Rachel had been so desperate to claim her inheritance that she'd lost it entirely. Her greed had cost her everything. The documents Rachel showed you, I said. The will she claimed gave her everything. Samuel's jaw tightened. Either forged or possibly an earlier draft from years ago that Thomas specifically superseded. The will I have here was signed, witnessed, and notarized 6 months ago. This is the legal document. What Rachel showed you has no validity whatsoever. So she knew, I said quietly. She knew about this will and she forged papers to trick me. That's what it looks like. And Barbara. Samuel's voice grew firm. What Rachel has done is called elder abuse and fraud. These are serious crimes, federal crimes. I sat there trying to process it all. 48 hours ago, I'd been sitting in a motel room with $100 believing I'd lost everything, believing my daughter's lies, believing I really was useless. Now I was learning I owned a multi-million-dollar home and had $42 million in assets. But more than the money, more than the house, one thought burned through everything else Thomas had known. 6 months before he passed, he'd known exactly what Rachel would try to do. He'd known, and he'd protected me. What do we do now? I whispered, my voice barely steady. Samuel smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd felt since Thomas passed. Now Barbara, we call the police about the fraud, and then we call Rachel and inform her that she's about to receive the shock of her life. Samuel's office transformed into something else entirely, a command center, humming with purpose. First things first, he said, reaching for his phone. We need Detective Robert Hayes. He handles financial crimes and elder abuse cases for Seattle PD. I watched as Samuel explained the situation in calm, measured terms. Forged documents, elder financial exploitation, systematic fraud. When he hung up, he looked satisfied. He's coming immediately. Called it textbook elder abuse. While we waited, Samuel made more calls. His secretary brought coffee. I couldn't drink, my hands shaking too badly to hold the cup steady. I listened as he contacted Barbara's bank, his voice authoritative, demanding immediate account freezes, pending criminal investigation. Another call to verify property records for 3,842 Willow Creek Court, establishing my legal ownership beyond any doubt. The office filled with purpose, with action, with the machinery of justice grinding into motion. For 6 weeks, I'd felt helpless, invisible, discarded. Now I was watching the system work for me instead of against me. Detective Hayes arrived within 30 minutes, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes that had seen too much, but also with a kind mouth that softened when Samuel introduced us. Mrs. Reynolds. He shook my hand gently. I'm sorry you're going through this. Unfortunately, what your daughter's done is more common than people think, but we're going to make it right. He sat across from me, notepad out, and walked me through everything. The timeline of Thomas's passing, Rachel's behavior in the weeks after, the fake concern, the suggestions about senior facilities, the increasing pressure to leave my home. Then the eviction 2 days ago. She gave you how much? Detective Hayes's pen paused. $100. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or disgust. I described the papers. Rachel had shown me official-looking documents with signatures and what appeared to be a notary seal. The detective's expression darkened. Did you keep copies? My stomach sank. No, Rachel took them back, said she needed them for estate processing. Of course she did, Detective Hayes made a note. Mrs. Reynolds, creating forged legal documents of this quality isn't something you do on a whim. This took planning expertise, probably months of preparation. Samuel slid the real will across the desk. The detective examined both documents carefully, taking photographs with his phone. The sophistication here suggests your daughter had help, he said, looking up at me. Tell me about Jason, your son-in-law. What's his background? I thought back. He's an investment banker, works for some firm downtown. He handled a lot of the paperwork after Thomas passed, organized things, he said. I bet he did. Detective Hayes made more notes. We'll need to investigate whether Jason or someone in his financial network was involved. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge, access to certain software, understanding of legal formatting, possibly connections to people who can produce fake notary seals. You think Jason helped her? I think we'd be foolish not to look into it. The next 2 hours moved with startling speed. Detective Hayes made calls, Samuel made calls, and I sat there watching my life transform in real time. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Detective Hayes had results. All accounts associated with your husband's estate are now frozen pending investigation, he reported. Property records confirm you as legal owner of the residence. And he allowed himself a small smile. Several credit cards Rachel apparently activated in anticipation of her inheritance all declined in the last hour. Samuel actually laughed. She's noticing. Oh, she's definitely noticing. As if summoned by our words, my phone rang. The sound cut through the office like a knife. Rachel's name flashed on the screen, and my first instinct was the old familiar dread, that automatic anxiety that came with disappointing my daughter, with not being enough, with failing to meet her expectations. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't alone. This time, I knew the truth. Samuel met my eyes and nodded encouragingly. Detective Hayes leaned forward, his expression intent. I took a breath, the first real breath I'd taken in weeks, and pressed accept. Rachel's voice came through, and it wasn't the cold, controlled tone from 2 days ago. She was panicking. Mom, where are you? There's some kind of mistake with the bank accounts. They're saying everything's frozen. What did you do? I pressed the speaker button. Rachel's voice filled Samuel's office, high-pitched with panic. Mom, seriously, I need you to tell me what's happening. The bank won't give me any information. They just keep saying there's an investigation. Hello, Rachel. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm sitting in Samuel Fletcher's office right now. You remember him, Dad's attorney, the one who read the real will to an empty room while you told him I was traveling in California. Silence on the other end. Heavy, thick silence. Then Rachel's voice again, but different now. Calculating. Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I discovered that you're a liar and a thief. The words felt strange in my mouth. I'd never spoken to her like this. Never. That's not fair. Rachel's tone shifted to injured innocence. I was trying to protect you from the complexity of managing all that money. You've never had to deal with investments, financial planning. I understand perfectly, Rachel. Something cold and hard had taken up residence in my chest. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own house with $100 because you thought I was too stupid to notice. Mom, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is obviously taking advantage of your emotional state. Detective Hayes raised an eyebrow. Samuel's mouth tightened. The grief is real, I said. But I'm not confused. I'm looking at Dad's will right now. The one he signed 6 months before he passed. The one that leaves me 70% of everything. A pause. I could almost hear Rachel's mind racing. Okay, fine. Her voice turned sharp. Even if that's true, I still inherited 30%. That's more than $10 million. So whatever little game you think you're playing, that $12.6 million was contingent on how you treated me after Dad passed Rachel. Another silence. Longer this time. And you told me to find somewhere else to go, that I was useless. You threw me out with $100 and watched me pack 43 years into 2 suitcases. My voice didn't waver. You triggered the forfeiture clause. That $12.6 million, it's mine now, all of it. That's impossible. But her voice had lost its certainty. Detective Robert Hayes is sitting right here if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with him. Rachel's voice rose, cracking slightly. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. I looked at Detective Hayes, who nodded encouragingly. I looked at Samuel, who gave me the smallest smile. Then I looked at my phone at Rachel's name on the screen and thought about everything she'd taken from me. Not just the house or the money, but my dignity, my sense of worth. Years of making myself smaller so she could feel bigger. Watch me, I said quietly, and hung up. For a moment, no one spoke. I stared at my phone, hardly believing I'd just done that. 43 years of being the accommodating mother, the one who smoothed things over, who apologized even when I'd done nothing wrong, who accepted blame to keep peace. All of it had just shattered with 2 words. Watch me. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from something that felt dangerously close to power. Samuel Fletcher was beaming. Barbara, that was extraordinary. Detective Hayes closed his notepad, looking at me with something like respect. Mrs. Reynolds, how long before she's arrested? My voice sounded different when I spoke, stronger, like it belonged to someone else, or maybe to the person I should have been all along. When Detective Hayes checked his watch, we have enough for a warrant now. I'd say they'll pick her up this evening. The hotel room was a significant upgrade from the Valley View Motor Court. Samuel had insisted on paying, refused to hear otherwise. Clean sheets, working heat, a window that actually locked. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, waiting for news I both wanted and dreaded. When Detective Hayes called at 8:30, I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Reynolds, I thought you'd want to know. We just arrested your daughter. My chest constricted. Relief and grief and something darker, something that tasted like vindication. Where the Metropolitan. She was having dinner with your son-in-law and another couple, celebrating from what we could tell. There was champagne on the table. Celebrating. Of course she was. Celebrating her inheritance. Celebrating getting rid of me. How did she... I couldn't finish the question. She didn't go quietly, Detective Hayes said, and I heard the weariness in his voice. Screamed about false arrest, demanded her lawyer. Turns out her lawyer is Jason's golf buddy. Nice guy, I'm sure, but he does corporate contracts, not criminal defense. He's in over his head. I tried to picture it, Rachel in handcuffs at the Metropolitan, that expensive restaurant, where she'd probably been ordering the most expensive items on the menu. Rachel, who always cared so much about appearances being led out past other diners. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt satisfied. I wasn't proud of that second part. What about Jason? We picked him up this morning at his office. Financial district, big glass tower, corner office with a view. Detective Hayes paused. Mrs. Reynolds, I need to tell you something about your son-in-law. He has a record. A record? Securities fraud. 7 years ago, before he married your daughter. Small case, pleaded down, mostly swept under the rug because his family has connections. But it's there. And our forensic accountant traced those forged documents to a printing company Jason's firm has used before for creating fraudulent investment prospectuses. The room spun slightly. Rachel had married a criminal. Had she known? Had Thomas known? Does Rachel know about his record? Hard to say, but either way they were working together on this. The forgeries are too sophisticated for one person, especially someone without technical expertise. After Detective Hayes hung up, I sat in that hotel room for a long time processing. My daughter was in custody. My son-in-law was a con artist. My life had become something I didn't recognize. But there was one thing I needed to do, one place I needed to be. Samuel had given me a key, the key to my own house, which Rachel had apparently been too busy to change the locks on. I took a taxi there, watching the familiar streets pass by in the dark. When we pulled up to 3842, Willow Creek court lights were on inside. Rachel's lights. In my house. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the home I'd lived in for 43 years. Then I walked up the front path and let myself in. The changes hit me immediately. Rachel had already started redecorating. New throw pillows on the couch, different curtains. Her expensive handbag on the console table, the same table where she'd set it when she came to throw me out. I walked upstairs slowly. The master bedroom door was open. Rachel had moved in completely. Her clothes in the closet where Thomas's suits had hung. Her perfume on the dresser. Her jewelry box next to the lamp. She'd even changed the bedding. Thomas's navy blue replaced with something cream-colored and modern. Something shifted in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More resolute. I found garbage bags in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, where Thomas and I had shared coffee every morning for 4 decades. I went back upstairs and started packing. Every item of Rachel's clothing, every shoe, every accessory, every trace of her presumptuous occupation of my space. It took 2 hours. When I finished, 6 large garbage bags sat on the front porch. Then I stood in my master bedroom, and looked around. Tomorrow I'd put Thomas's things away properly with love and care. Tonight I just needed to reclaim this space. I lay down on the bed with the cream-colored sheets Rachel had chosen, and for the first time since Thomas passed, I slept in the master bedroom. The house felt different now, not because Thomas was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. 3 days after the arrests, my doorbell rang at 9 in the morning. I'd been sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and trying to decide which room to tackle first. The house needed reclaiming room by room, but I was overwhelmed by where to start. When I opened the door, Evelyn Porter stood on my front porch looking like she'd stepped out of a country club magazine. Perfectly styled silver hair, a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my first car, and enough jewelry to fund a small nonprofit. Jason's mother had arrived. Barbara. She said my name like it was a formality she'd rather skip. We need to talk. I didn't invite her in, but she walked past me anyway, settling herself on my living room sofa like she was granting me an audience. Her gaze swept the room with barely concealed disdain, probably cataloging everything that needed updating, everything that wasn't up to her standards. This situation with Jason is unfortunate. She began crossing her legs elegantly. But I think we can resolve it rationally, between reasonable people. I remained standing. Reasonable people don't commit fraud, Mrs. Porter. Evelyn, please. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. And let's be clear about what happened. Rachel led Jason astray. He was simply supporting his wife, not understanding the full implications of her poor choices. The nerve of it took my breath away. Your son helped forge legal documents. That's not supporting a spouse. That's conspiracy. Jason made some mistakes, yes, but prosecuting him seems rather vindictive, don't you think? Her smile was practiced polished. He has a career, children, a reputation to maintain. Sending him to prison serves no one. It serves justice. Evelyn's smile tightened. Barbara, let me be direct. Jason's family is prepared to compensate you for your inconvenience. Shall we say $5 million in exchange for dropping the charges against Jason? $5 million. To forgive the man who'd helped steal $42 million from me. Your answer is no. I said it as a statement, not a question. I haven't given you my answer yet. I sat down across from her finally, but let me understand. Your son participated in a scheme to defraud me of everything I owned, and you think $5 million is appropriate compensation. Be realistic. The polished veneer cracked slightly, showing something colder underneath. Jason has a career ahead of him, important work, connections that matter. And frankly, you'd never have known how to manage that money anyway. There it was. The same condescension I'd heard from Rachel. The same assumption that I was too simple, too unsophisticated to deserve what was mine. Mrs. Porter, I think we're done here. She stood smoothing her skirt. Think about it carefully, Barbara. $5 million is a generous offer. More than generous considering. Considering what? Considering that Jason's legal team has found some very interesting information about your late husband's business practices. Her smile returned sharper now. Thomas wasn't quite the upstanding citizen everyone thought he was he? All those consulting fees, those offshore accounts. It would be unfortunate if that became public during the trial. Very unfortunate for your reputation, for Thomas's memory. My blood went cold. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the reality of your situation. Evelyn picked up her designer handbag. $5 million, Barbara, my final offer. Think about what a trial would do, not just to Jason, but to your own family's name. Sometimes discretion is worth more than vengeance. She let herself out, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. I stood in my living room, heart pounding, as her words echoed in my head. Thomas's business practices, offshore accounts, consulting fees that didn't add up. What had Thomas been hiding? And how could it possibly be used against me now? For the first time since discovering the truth about the will, I felt a flicker of real fear. Not fear of Rachel or Jason, but fear that maybe Thomas hadn't been the man I thought he was. The threat hung in the air like smoke, and I had no idea how to clear it. I stood in the foyer of 3842 Willow Creek Court for the first time in months, breathing in the familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood. My house. My home for 43 years. The place Rachel had stolen from me with forged signatures and lies. Detective Hayes had supervised the locks being changed that afternoon. Rachel and Jason's belongings were stacked in boxes by the front door, ready for pickup under police supervision. Everything they'd brought into my home removed like the contamination it was. But I wasn't here for satisfaction. I was here for answers. Thomas's study was exactly as he'd left it. Dark mahogany desk leather chair worn smooth by decades of use, built-in bookshelves lined with construction manuals and project binders. I'd avoided this room after his death let Rachel handle sorting through his papers. That had been a mistake. I started with the desk drawers. The first three contained ordinary items, pens, letterhead, old business cards. The fourth drawer was locked. I found the key taped under the desk's center drawer, exactly where Thomas had hidden things for 40 years. Some habits never changed. Inside were file folders, perhaps 20 of them, each labeled with company names I didn't recognize. Cascade Holdings, Pacific Northwest Ventures, Rainier Investment Group, Olympia Financial Services. I pulled out the first folder and began reading. At first it looked like standard business documents. Invoices, payment schedules, account statements. But the amounts were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars moving between companies I'd never heard Thomas mention. Services rendered for projects that had no names, no addresses, no details beyond vague descriptions. I opened another folder, more of the same. Shell companies paying other shell companies for work that seemed to exist only on paper. My hands started shaking. I'd been married to Thomas for 43 years. I knew his business. Reynolds Construction built hospitals, office buildings, shopping centers. Real projects with real contracts and real crews. These documents showed something else entirely money-moving through a network of fake companies, laundered clean through legitimate-looking transactions. I pulled out more folders, spreading them across the desk. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, routing numbers for banks I'd never heard of. Payment schedules that matched no construction timeline I'd ever seen. How long had this been going on? I checked dates on the oldest documents. 12 years, possibly longer. My husband had been running a money laundering operation for over a decade, and I'd never suspected a thing. I thought about the inheritance Rachel had tried to steal, $42 million. How much of that was legitimate? How much came from whatever criminal enterprise Thomas had been involved in? I felt sick. Rachel's lawyer could use this. If the money was dirty, if Thomas had been a criminal, then perhaps Rachel's forgery didn't matter. Perhaps the FBI would seize everything anyway, and I'd end up with nothing despite winning in court. Or worse, perhaps they'd think I knew. that I'd been complicit all along. I sat in Thomas's leather chair surrounded by evidence of crimes I hadn't known existed and tried to think clearly. Samuel needed to see this. Maybe Agent Coleman. Maybe a forensic accountant who could trace these transactions and determine what was legal and what wasn't. But first, I needed to understand what I was looking at. I pulled my phone from my purse and began photographing every page, every statement, every suspicious transaction. Whatever Thomas had been involved in, whatever Rachel's lawyers might try to use against me, I needed documentation. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight. I was 67 years old, sitting in my dead husband's study, discovering that the man I'd loved for 4 decades had been a stranger. And I might have been married to a criminal for 43 years without knowing it. My hands trembled as I dialed Samuel Fletcher's number at 7:30 the next morning. I hadn't slept. The documents were spread across the motel room's small table, their implications growing darker with each passing hour. "Samuel, I found something," I said when he answered, my voice cracking. "In Thomas's files, companies that don't exist, money moving through fake businesses. I think Thomas was laundering money." There was a long pause. "Don't touch anything else," Samuel said quietly, "and don't talk to anyone about this. I'm calling someone who can help." Michelle Foster arrived at the Valley View Motor Court at 6 that evening. She was 42 with sharp gray eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent 20 years investigating financial crimes for the Seattle Police Department before going private. Her specialty was following money trails that others missed. I led her to the table where Thomas's documents waited like unexploded bombs. "Walk me through what you found," Michelle said, pulling on latex gloves before touching the first file. For the next 6 hours, Michelle worked in near silence. She photographed every page, cross-referenced company names on her laptop, traced routing numbers through databases I didn't know existed. Occasionally, she would pause, her expression darkening before continuing with renewed intensity. At midnight, Michelle finally sat back. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need you to prepare yourself." My mouth went dry. "How bad is it?" "It's sophisticated money laundering," Michelle said bluntly. "These shell companies, Cascade Holdings, Pacific Northwest Ventures, Rainier Investment Group, they're all fake. The invoices are for services that were never performed. The payment schedules match known patterns for washing illegal funds through legitimate-looking businesses." "But Thomas ran a construction company," I whispered. "He built hospitals, office buildings." "His legitimate business was probably real," Michelle interrupted. "But someone was using it as a front to clean dirty money. Based on these documents, this operation ran for at least 12 years. We're talking millions of dollars." I felt the room spin. "How much?" "Conservatively, 8 to 10 million. Michelle's voice softened slightly. "Mrs. Reynolds, if the FBI discovers this, they'll seize everything. The house, the accounts, every asset connected to your husband. Asset forfeiture laws don't require a conviction, just evidence that property was involved in criminal activity." "But I didn't know," I said desperately. "I never knew anything about this." "That may not matter." Michelle began gathering documents. "We need to—" She stopped studying my face with sudden intensity. "Mrs. Reynolds, how long have you been having memory problems?" I blinked at the abrupt change. "What?" "Confusion difficulty, concentrating, unexplained drowsiness." "How long?" "I don't know. Years, I suppose. My doctor said it was normal aging, maybe early dementia." "When did it start getting worse?" I thought back. "After Thomas died." Rachel said I was forgetting conversations, acting strangely. She started making my coffee every morning, said I needed someone to look after me. Michelle's expression went very still. "She made your coffee?" "Yes, every morning. Why does that—" "I need a sample of your hair," Michelle said abruptly. "Now." Why?" "Because I've seen this before." Michelle was already pulling an evidence bag from her briefcase. 3 years ago, I worked a case where a daughter was slowly drugging her father to make him seem incompetent. Benzodiazepines in his morning coffee made him confused, forgetful, easier to manipulate. My heart stopped. "No, Rachel wouldn't. Hair doesn't lie, Mrs. Reynolds." Toxicology testing can detect drugs months after exposure. The results came back 48 hours later. Benzodiazepines, consistent levels over approximately 18 months. Someone was drugging you, Michelle said, showing me the lab report. Someone who had daily access, someone who made your coffee every morning. I sat in the motel room that had become my prison, the evidence of 2 betrayals spread before me. My husband had been a criminal. My daughter had been poisoning me. Tomorrow, Evelyn Porter would arrive with lawyers to blackmail me. I had fought so hard to reclaim my inheritance, my dignity, my life. And now I was about to lose it all again. The phone rang at 8:15 the following evening. I was sitting in Thomas's study, surrounded by the evidence of his double life, when I saw Rachel's name on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, Rachel." "Mom." Rachel's voice was different now. Calm, controlled, nothing like the panic from our last call. "We need to meet tonight. There are things about Dad that change everything." My grip tightened on the phone. Michelle's warnings echoed in my mind, but I kept my voice steady. "I already know Rachel. About the money laundering." There was a brief pause. I could almost hear her recalculating. "Then you understand the situation we're in," Rachel said smoothly. "Jason's attorney has been in contact with the FBI. They're willing to negotiate." "Negotiate what exactly?" "A deal that protects all of us." Rachel's tone turned businesslike, as if discussing a simple contract. "Jason provides information about Dad's criminal network in exchange for immunity. The fraud charges against both of us disappear. You keep $5 million and the house. The government gets the rest. Everyone walks away clean." I closed my eyes. "You're asking me to help you profit from your crimes by exploiting Dad's crimes." "I'm asking you to be realistic," Rachel shot back. "The alternative is you lose everything and potentially face charges yourself as a beneficiary of criminal proceeds. They'll say you knew Mom. They'll say you had to have known what Dad was doing for 43 years. I didn't know. "Can you prove that?" Rachel let the question hang. "My attorney says spousal ignorance is hard to sell, especially when you're claiming millions in inheritance. But if we present a united front, if we cooperate fully, the FBI gets a bigger fish and we all get to move on with our lives." My mind raced. The money laundering, the forged will, the drugging. Rachel had an answer for everything, a way to twist every crime into an opportunity. "What about what you did to me?" I asked quietly. "Forging Dad's will, stealing my inheritance, kicking me out of my own home." "Family dispute," Rachel said dismissively. "Misunderstanding over estate documents. Once the criminal matter is resolved, we can settle the civil issues privately. I'll transfer your share, you drop the charges. Clean slate." "You've thought of everything." "I've had time to think." Rachel's voice hardened. "Jason made bail 2 hours ago. His attorney is very good, Mom. Very connected. The FBI meeting is tomorrow morning at 9. He needs an answer tonight." I stared at the documents spread across Thomas's desk. Shell companies. Fake invoices. Millions in dirty money. And somewhere in all of this, my daughter had found a way to weaponize her father's crimes. "I need time to think," I said. "The meeting is in 13 hours, Rachel pressed. "After that, the deal expires. It's $5 million and the house, or it's nothing. Your choice, Mom, but choose wisely." The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of Thomas's study, surrounded by evidence of his double life. 43 years married to a stranger. A daughter who had inherited more than money from her father. She had inherited his talent for deception. But Rachel had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated what I would do when cornered. I picked up my phone and dialed a different number. "Agent Coleman." "This is Barbara Reynolds. I have a story to tell you and I think you'll find it very interesting." Barbara arrived at the FBI's Seattle field office at 8:30 the following morning, Samuel Fletcher at her side. The building was austere, gray concrete, all security checkpoints and bulletproof glass. Agent Jennifer Coleman met them in the lobby and led them to a windowless conference room on the 3rd floor. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Reynolds," Coleman said, gesturing to the chairs across from her. A recording device sat in the center of the table, its red light already glowing. "I understand you have information about your daughter's activities." Barbara took a breath and began. She told Coleman everything: Rachel's fraud, Jason's forgery, Evelyn's bribe attempt. The extortion call last night, Rachel's scheme to manipulate Thomas's crimes into leverage for her own immunity. "I would rather tell the truth than let my daughter manipulate this situation to her advantage," Barbara said firmly. Coleman listened without interrupting her pen, moving steadily across a legal pad. When Barbara finished, the agent looked up. "And what about your husband's money laundering operation? You discovered evidence of that as well." Barbara's hands tightened in her lap. "Yes, I'm terrified of what it means. But I won't protect crimes, even his. I didn't know what Thomas was doing. If I'm held responsible for that—" Her voice cracked. "Then I'll accept it. But I won't help Rachel profit from any of it." Coleman studied her for a long moment. "Mrs. Reynolds, would you be willing to wear a wire tonight?" "A wire. We arrange a meeting with Rachel and Jason. You get them talking about the extortion attempt, the fraud, the forgery, their own words on record." Coleman's expression was neutral, but her eyes were sharp. "It's not without risk. But with your cooperation, we can build a case that puts them away for a very long time." Barbara didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." Samuel started to protest, but Barbara cut him off with a look. She had spent months being afraid, being manipulated, being treated like she was incompetent. No more. Coleman nodded and reached for a file. "We'll need to prep you on what to A knock interrupted her. The door opened and a young FBI clerk stepped in. "Agent Coleman, there's a minor here asking to see Barbara Reynolds. Says it's urgent. He has evidence related to the case." Barbara's heart stopped. "Lucas." A moment later, her grandson appeared in the doorway. He was 15, tall and thin, clutching his phone like a lifeline. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. "Grandma." His voice shook. "I need to show you something." "I need to show all of you something." Coleman gestured him inside. "You're Lucas Porter." "Yes, ma'am." Lucas sat down, his hands trembling as he unlocked his phone. "I've been recording my mom and Jason for months." The room went very still. "Recording them doing what?" Coleman asked carefully. Lucas looked at Barbara, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Grandpa changed his will 6 months before he died. He told me something was wrong, that Mom was planning something. He said I needed to watch out for you, Grandma, so I started recording conversations, just in case." He tapped his phone, and Rachel's voice filled the room. "The new will is in his desk drawer. We wait until he's gone, then I burn it and file the old one. She'll never know the difference." Jason's voice. "And if she fights it, we'll have her declared incompetent. I've already talked to Dr. Morrison about documenting her cognitive decline." Coleman leaned forward. "How many of these recordings do you have?" Lucas's fingers shook as he scrolled. 47. Some are short, some are long conversations. He played another. "Rachel. The benzodiazepines are working. She's confused, forgetful. Another 6 months and we'll have medical documentation to support incompetency." Barbara's hand flew to her mouth. Coleman's expression had gone from interested to riveted. "Lucas, how long have you had these recordings?" "Since last April," Lucas whispered. "Almost 10 months. I didn't know what to do with them. I was scared. But when they arrested Mom, when I found out what she did to you, Grandma," his voice broke, "I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Barbara pulled him into her arms, tears streaming down her face. Coleman was already on her phone calling someone. When she hung up, she looked at Lucas with something close to awe. "Lucas, you are an incredibly brave young man. These recordings change everything." She turned to Barbara, respect clear in her eyes. "Mrs. Reynolds will still wire you for tonight, but now we have enough evidence to bury them completely. Your daughter is about to learn that the 2 people she underestimated most, her mother and her son, are the ones who destroyed her. You just watch my 15-year-old grandson hand over recordings that would send his own mother to prison to protect me. If that moment kept you here, comment 1 below. I want to know who's still on this journey with me. Quick note, Some details throughout have been fictionalized for privacy and pacing. If you'd prefer not to continue, feel free to step away now. I returned to 3842 Willow Creek Court at 8 o'clock that evening, the FBI wire taped beneath my blouse. The small recording device felt like it was burning against my skin, a constant reminder of what I was about to do. Agent Coleman had spent 2 hours prepping me that afternoon. What questions to ask? How to keep them talking? How to stay calm even when they said things designed to hurt me? Get them to explain the scheme in their own words, Coleman had instructed. Get them to admit they knew about the forgery, the drugging, the extortion attempt. And Mrs. Reynolds, stay safe. We'll be right outside. Now I stood in my own living room waiting for my daughter and son-in-law to arrive so I could help send them to prison. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:15. I opened the door. Rachel stood on my porch looking confident, almost triumphant. Jason carried a leather briefcase, the picture of professional competence. They thought they were walking into a negotiation they'd already won. "Mom," Rachel said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this." I led them to the dining room table, the same table where we'd shared Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings, where Rachel had blown out birthday candles as a little girl. Jason opened his briefcase and pulled out documents, spreading them across the polished wood with practiced efficiency. Settlement agreements, asset transfers, immunity deals. "Let's walk through this," Jason said, his tone businesslike. $5 million to you. The house stays in your name. The fraud charges get dropped as part of the federal cooperation agreement. Everyone moves forward. I sat down slowly, forcing my hands to stay steady. "Help me understand something. You committed fraud, and I'm supposed to accept $5 million from my own money. Mom, the alternative is we all lose everything when the FBI seizes Dad's criminal proceeds," Rachel said, leaning forward. "This way you keep something. We keep our freedom. It's the smart play." "Our attorney is in contact with the FBI," Jason added. "One word from us, and they'll prioritize the money laundering case over the estate fraud. We're offering them bigger fish." I looked at my daughter. "You mean extortion?" Rachel's smile didn't waver. "I mean realistic negotiation." I took a breath, remembering Coleman's instructions. Get them talking. Get them to admit everything. "Tell me something, Rachel. When did you start planning this before Dad died?" Rachel's expression flickered. "What?" I pressed forward. "The forged will. The guardianship papers you prepared 3 months before he passed. Drugging my coffee every morning to make me seem confused. When did it start?" Jason stood, abruptly grabbing for his briefcase. "This conversation is over." "Actually, Jason," I said quietly, "I think it's just beginning." The doors burst open from 3 directions at once. FBI agents flooded into my dining room, weapons drawn, voices sharp and commanding. Rachel screamed. Jason dropped his briefcase papers, scattering across the floor. Agent Coleman stepped forward, her badge held high. "Rachel Porter and Jason Porter, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness." Rachel's head whipped toward me, her face a mask of betrayal and shock. "Mom, what did you do?" I stood up, pulling the wire from beneath my blouse and setting it on the table between us. "The same thing you did when you forged Dad's will and stole my inheritance, sweetheart. Only my way is legal. You recorded us." Rachel's voice rose to a shriek. "Your own daughter. My own daughter who poisoned me for 18 months. I said, my voice cold and steady. "My own daughter who conspired to have me declared incompetent. My own daughter who tried to steal $42 million and leave me with nothing." An agent cuffed Jason's hands behind his back. Another did the same to Rachel. "You're making a mistake," Rachel hissed as they led her toward the door. "You don't know what Dad was involved in. When the truth comes out, you'll lose everything anyway." "We'll see about that," I said. I watched them walk, Rachel and Jason, to separate FBI vehicles, their faces visible through the windows. Shocked, furious, defeated. Agent Coleman dismissed the other officers, then turned to me. Her expression had shifted from professional to something almost compassionate. "Mrs., Reynolds, before you hear this from anyone else, there's something you need to know about your husband's business. The money laundering you discovered. She paused, choosing her words carefully. It's not what you think. Can we talk? The other agents left with Rachel and Jason. The house fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Agent Coleman gestured toward the living room sofa. Sit down, Mrs. Reynolds, please. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the cushions, my entire body shaking. This was it. The moment when I learned that everything I'd fought for the inheritance, the house, my dignity, would be seized by the federal government because my husband had been a criminal. The money laundering, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm going to lose everything, aren't I? Coleman sat down across from me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. Mrs. Reynolds, your husband wasn't laundering money for criminals. He was working for us. I stared at her, unable to process the words. Thomas Reynolds was an FBI confidential informant for 12 years, Coleman continued. Deep cover operative. Long-term investigation into organized crime families operating throughout the Pacific Northwest. The kind of sensitive operation where even local FBI field offices weren't informed. I couldn't breathe. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the suspicious transactions, all of it was part of a federal operation. We allowed Thomas to keep a percentage of the funds that moved through his construction business as payment for his cooperation and to maintain his cover. Every dollar he left you was earned through legitimate federal cooperation. 12 years, I whispered. He never told me. He couldn't, Coleman said gently. The investigation was too sensitive. The people Thomas was informing on, they were dangerous, Mrs. Reynolds. If they'd known you knew, you would have become a target. He was protecting you. Tears streamed down my face. I thought he was a criminal. I thought our entire marriage was a lie. Your marriage was real. His love for you was real. But his work with us required absolute secrecy. Coleman leaned forward. Thomas died before the operation concluded. But his 12 years of cooperation led to 47 arrests and the seizure of over $200 million in criminal assets. He was a hero, Mrs. Reynolds, and the $42 million he left you is completely legitimate and entirely yours. I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. When I finally looked up, Coleman was watching me with something like sympathy. There's an irony here you should appreciate, she said. Rachel and Jason had no idea about Thomas's FBI cooperation. They suspected criminal activity. The shell companies were suspicious enough, but they didn't know about the federal aspect. Your daughter tried to extort you using information that would actually exonerate your husband. A broken laugh escaped my throat. She was threatening me with proof of his innocence. Essentially, yes. Her greed made her blind. If she'd done proper research, if she'd approached the FBI first, she might have learned the truth. Instead, she saw an opportunity for leverage and took it. Coleman pulled out a file folder. The charges against Rachel and Jason are extensive. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, attempted extortion of a federal witness. That's you, by the way. Assault for the drugging. With Lucas's recordings, the wire evidence from tonight, and the toxicology reports, we have an airtight case. What happens now? I asked. Both took plea deals this afternoon to avoid trial, Coleman said. Rachel will serve 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. Jason got 6 years. Asset forfeiture of $12.6 million. Everything they stole from you will be returned. They'll pay restitution fines and forfeit any claim to Thomas's estate. And Lucas. My voice cracked. And Mia. Child Services interviewed Lucas this morning. He's articulate, mature, and made it very clear where he wants to be. Coleman's smile returned. Temporary custody with you pending permanent arrangements. Mia's only 2, so the court will decide what's best for her. But Lucas is 15. His preference carries weight. After Coleman left, I sat alone in Thomas's study, my study now. The room where I'd discovered what I thought was evidence of my husband's crimes. The room where I'd photographed documents I believed would destroy my life. My husband wasn't a criminal, he was a hero. My daughter was going to prison for 5 years. My grandson had saved me with his courage, and I was about to inherit $42 million and start a completely new life. At 67 years old, after 43 years of marriage, after being thrown away like garbage, I was finally truly free. 6 months after the trial, I stood in what used to be Thomas's study, now flooded with morning light from the 3 new skylights I'd installed. The dark mahogany paneling was gone, replaced by soft cream walls. My easel stood exactly where his desk had been for 43 years. I was painting a self-portrait, a woman in sunlight facing forward, unafraid. The doorbell rang at 9. Claire Simmons, my financial advisor, arrived for our quarterly review with a briefcase full of reports about money I was finally learning to manage myself. We sat in the breakfast nook, drinking coffee I'd picked up from a local Seattle cafe that morning. I didn't make coffee at home anymore. Some habits, once poisoned, stayed that way. The Barbara Reynolds Elder Protection Fund is performing beautifully, Claire said, spreading documents across the table. $15 million in endowment capital. We've funded legal aid for 43 seniors facing financial exploitation from family members so far. The legislative advocacy work is gaining momentum, too. 3 states are considering stronger elder protection laws based on your case. I studied the numbers, still amazed that I could do this, that I had the resources to turn my nightmare into protection for others. What about the documentary deal? I asked. Netflix finalized everything last week. A Mother's Reckoning, an American crime story, goes into production next month. All proceeds to elder advocacy organizations, as you specified. I nodded. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every senior who'd been betrayed by the people who should have protected them. Rachel sent another letter, Claire said carefully. 17 now. She's requesting supervised visitation with Lucas and Mia. I set down my cup. What do Lucas and Mia want? Lucas is 16 now. He told me last week he's not ready. Maybe someday, but not now. And Mia, she's 10. The court appointed a guardian ad litem. They're recommending limited supervised contact once Rachel completes her rehabilitation programs if Mia agrees. Rachel was 4 months into her 5-year federal sentence. Jason was serving 6. I'd read the first few letters Rachel sent, the self-justification, the bargaining, the desperate apologies that somehow still blamed everyone else. Then I stopped opening them. Some relationships once shattered by such profound betrayal couldn't be repaired with words. Blood didn't mean family. Family meant the people who protected you when you were most vulnerable. Family was Lucas sitting in an FBI office at 15, terrified but brave, handing over recordings that would destroy his mother because it was the right thing to do. I won't stand in the way if Lucas or Mia want a relationship with their mother someday, I said. But it'll be their choice when they're ready. Not because Rachel thinks she's entitled to redemption on her timeline. Claire smiled. You've come a long way, Barbara. I looked around the breakfast nook, the same space where Rachel had made me coffee every morning, carefully measuring out benzodiazepines to make me confused and pliable. Where she'd told me I was losing my mind, where she'd convinced me I needed her to survive. Now the room was mine. The house was mine. My life was mine. I painted in the mornings. I worked with the foundation in the afternoons, reviewing grant applications and meeting with lawmakers. I'd started teaching an art class at the senior center on Thursdays. I met regularly with other survivors of elder abuse, listening to their stories, helping connect them with resources. I was 67 years old and finally learning who I was when I wasn't maintaining someone else's shrine or meeting someone else's expectations. The self-portrait on my easel showed a woman who looked strong, independent, unafraid. A woman facing dawn instead of dusk. Outside my studio window, the sun rose over Seattle, breaking through the morning clouds, the way it always did here, slowly, persistently, inevitably. Tomorrow, I would keep building the life I'd chosen, instead of the life others had prescribed for me. And if Rachel wanted to repair our relationship someday, she'd better bring a complete transformation, one equal to my own. Because the useless mother she'd thrown away, that woman, was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemy never thought you could be. Looking back at everything that happened, I see how dangerously blind trust made me. For 43 years, I never questioned financial documents, never insisted on being part of important decisions, never protected myself legally. I believed devotion meant complete surrender. I thought being a good wife meant making myself small, invisible, unnecessary. I was catastrophically wrong. Don't be like me. Don't wait until someone kicks you out of your own home to realize you should have safeguarded your future. Family drama stories like mine unfold every single day across America. Adult children forging wills, spouses hiding assets, relatives systematically exploiting the trust of those who love them most. The difference between victims who disappear and victims who fight back often comes down to one decision: refusing to stay silent. Grandma stories aren't supposed to involve FBI wires and federal prison sentences. We're supposed to bake cookies, spoil grandchildren, and fade quietly into our golden years. Society expects us to be grateful for whatever scraps our families leave us. But when family drama stories cross the line from dysfunction into felony, someone has to stand up and say enough. Even if that someone is a confused, grieving widow with $100 and nowhere to sleep. God gave me 3 gifts I almost didn't recognize. First, He gave me Lucas, a 15-year-old boy with the moral courage to record his own mother's crimes, because God whispered to his conscience that protecting his grandmother mattered more than blind. Family loyalty. Second, God gave me strength I never knew existed when I sat in that motel room and decided I wouldn't vanish quietly into poverty and shame. Third, God gave me time to rebuild at 67 when I genuinely believed my story was ending. Instead, it was finally truly beginning. Grandma stories should teach resilience, not resignation. They should demonstrate power, not powerlessness. Grandma stories matter because we matter our lives, our dignity, our voices, our refusal to be erased. My journey teaches one undeniable truth. The people who underestimate you most completely are the very ones you will surprise most profoundly. Never let anyone convince you that age makes you disposable. Never let anyone persuade you that family loyalty means accepting abuse. And never, ever let anyone tell you it's too late to fight back. Because at 67, I learned the most important lesson of my life. Family drama stories don't have to end with the elder losing everything. Sometimes, if you're brave enough and stubborn enough, they end with justice.